right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Live Your Purpose podcast. I'm your host, John Morgan Jr. Before we get into, who our special guest is for today, allow me to say thank y'all to everybody who has been supporting the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, the Live Your Purpose podcast. Please subscribe, like, review, share the podcast, tell a friend, we're also available on audio platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. So please check us out on those audio platforms as well. Again, man, I want to just say thank you to everybody who's been supporting. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback from people who watch the podcast on YouTube, a lot of people who listen to it and digest it audio. A lot of people have been supporting the merch, so I really appreciate that. Continue to support. I really appreciate that. I never take it for granted that people support our mission. Again, for those who are not aware, the Live Your Purpose podcast is a space where we have entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs specifically, and we talk to them about their backstories. But we also, here to have a organic and authentic conversation where the goal is to really uplift, empower, and to build the consciousness of people. We want to serve each other, but the goal is to help somebody else. We never want to shy away from what the goal of this platform and what this space is. We try to be responsible with our platform. So without further ado, I want to get into, who our special guest is for today. So we have Miss Patrice Horton. She is an entrepreneur, a brand manager, and she's the partner of Elemnt 13. Her current clients include Mr. David Gross. If you're familiar with Nipsey Hussle, Dave Gross has done a lot of close things with Nip. He also does some things with Vector 90, our opportunity. She also works closely with Kirksey. It's actually funny because the Browns got us a playoff game win last night. And Kirksey used to be a beast linebacker for the Browns, but now he is, playing with the Packers. And she is also working closely with Mookie Betts. If you're a baseball fan at all, you cannot be a baseball fan and not heard that name, Mookie Betts, current champion of the LA Dodgers. So that's just to name a few names, of some of the client lists of who our guest is today. So, Miss Patrice, what's up with you? Thank you so much for coming on. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here today. I think I told you before, I don't do this often, but right. I thought this was a great platform just to keep, other entrepreneurs encouraged. So I'm so happy to be here today, and, let's rock out.
No doubt. So again, we want to get into your backstory a little bit. So let's start at the very beginning. You were originally from Cleveland, correct?
Yes.
Now, when you reflect back on Cleveland, growing up when you were a kid, what's some of your just fondest, earliest memories of being a kid growing up in the city of Cleveland?
So I'm a music head, and it's probably because my father helped curate the music scene in Cleveland, Ohio. So I just recall being a little girl watching my dad, like he had these 2 turntables in our dining room, and just watching him just like scratch all day long. So I loved music. Like I could listen to music, I actually, to this day, I wake up to music. I go to bed to music. But I would have to say, the fondest memory is when Tupac Shakur was in town. And my parents were going through they were about to get a divorce. My dad ran a hip hop magazine called It's a Rap. And he was like on the phone, and he was like, "Oh, we secured the Tupac interview." And they was like, "Yeah, but you got to get there in the next 30 minutes. He like, "I got my daughter with me. I'm about to take her to school." But literally, like, he didn't have time. And I was like, as soon as I heard him get off the phone, I was like, "Daddy, I want to go."
Right.
So we ended up going to a studio. And I remember he was like, "Don't tell your mama you ain't go to school." But the school ended up calling my mom to tell her, "Patrice is in the school." And my dad didn't call me out. So I remember my dad picking my mom up from work, and my mom was like, "Why didn't Patrice go to school?" And I was like, "I met Tupac Shakur."
And they was in the midst of going through a divorce.
And they're in the midst of like getting ready to go through a divorce. So she was like, you not taking my child to school so you can go interview somebody for this magazine. Like I'll never forget it. And I'm sitting in the back seat like, but it was amazing.
Right,
like,
right.
And I understood, like, so celebrities were never, I was kind of used to it. They were always around because my father interviewed them for the magazine when different rappers would come into town, and even R&B musicians would come into town. They would get interviewed for the magazine. We would have them over to our house. So the celebrity thing never really like amused me, but it was something about Tupac that I was just like, I had to be there.
Wow.
So I think that's what I remember. I remember growing up in music, just engulfed in it all around. And I always knew as a little girl, I'm gonna work in the music industry. Like, I never wanted to be like a singer or anything like that. But my mom was the businesswoman. So it was like, I want to tell people what to do. I'm real bossy. So it was like, I'm going to tell people what to do. I want to get stuff done. I want to work in the music industry. I knew that as a little girl.
Yeah, that's dope. So what year was this?
This probably had to be like 91, 92.
Oh, so this is early in Pac's career at that.
Yes. So my father has started, way before I was born. He was DJing. If you're from Cleveland, like the St. Clair area, he was DJing something called Beckham Hall. And it would just be sold out every weekend. So my dad's name is DJ Johnny O. So he was very well known for his skills. He worked for Motown, he worked for Def Jam, he's worked for a lot of the different labels. And so at that point in time, he had one of the biggest rap hip hop magazines, and anybody who I wanted to meet, crisscross. It was like, okay, I'm gonna call Michael Malden up and we're gonna go backstage. I think I met crisscross every time they stepped in Ohio.
Man, and see, it's so crazy because in 2021 to say you met crisscross, it don't hit the same.
Right.
Early 90s, if you said that you met crisscross, and that was a serious thing, man. So that's
right.
Some young people not gonna really understand the seriousness of what you talking about right now. But
they won't.
Everything. That's a fact. Yeah, that's a fact. Yeah, that's a fact. So you were actually like in the room with your father as he was conducting the interview with
in the corner. I understood that when my dad was working, I didn't talk, I didn't ask for anything. And I learned that lesson at a very young age. Sometimes you have to just sit in the room and absorb the information that you hear. And instead of always talking, it showed me things that maybe I want to do, or knowledge, even at a young age. Maybe I didn't fully understand it, but I heard certain things about, standing up for Black people. We got to stick together. I heard those things at a young age. But yeah, my father, we had a bond, like we had an understanding. So it's no surprise that I'm in the industry that I'm in now, because this wasn't like new to me. It was easy for me to understand and grasp the concept. When daddy is working, you just sit there and be quiet because you're really not even supposed to be here.
Yeah, but that's so powerful of just like, and I don't even necessarily know if your father was doing it intentionally, but unconsciously he was showing you some things and you were literally observing. I mean, it's always interesting about children because it's not always about what you tell kids. They do what they see. It's about what they see you do. So for you to see your father conducting interviews and just doing this type of work in this industry, it ultimately, played a huge role into your life. So that's amazing.
It was the exposure, and I'm a firm believer on, even with any of my clients, when we're doing work in the community, my thing is not, okay, we're going to go drop these gifts off or we're going to feed these kids a pizza party. How do we touch these kids long term? How do we open doors for them to where they say, hey, when I met Mookie Betts, like, it wasn't just a meet and greet. His team reached out to me. They saw something in me. They gave me opportunity, because I'm a firm believer that when we give our kids exposure, we give them a new light on life. Like they see something that they've never seen before. They've been around things, and exposure, it's a beautiful thing, right? I remember the first time I was on a private jet with a client, I was like, listen, if I can't ride like this all the time, I don't want to do this.
Right.
I just don't want to do it. Because when I had to get on that commercial flight, I was like, so I can't just get on the plane when I want to. Like I was exposed to something. So then it made me work harder. It made me say, okay, I need to get to a certain level of life so I can travel like this, live like this. So yeah, exposure is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that you remember specifically about Pac and from that time, or were you just too young? It was just
I don't remember much in that moment. I remember just kind of absorbing the room. And literally maybe a few months later after that, my father then interviewed Biggie.
Wow.
And I remember like, Dad, why you ain't take me? He was like, it was too late. But I just remember like looking at all of the pictures and being in awe of it. So when Biggie died, okay, now I'm in like 5th or 6th grade. I had pictures of Biggie and my dad, and everybody was like, that ain't real. That ain't real. Because really, I was kind of raised, you don't brag about what we do over here. We just do it. So yeah, I don't quite remember vividly like about Pac, but I remember being in that room.
Yeah, that's still powerful. I mean, you were still around one of the most legendary, iconic artists, ever. You know what I'm saying? That's
right.
Amazing to say. You're gonna be able to share that forever.
Right.
So that's an amazing feat. Listen, we coming off of one of the most historical and tumultuous years ever. I mean, even when I speak to my elders, my grandparents, and people who have lived a long time, they've never seen a year like we just had in 2020. So like I know for me personally, it was an extremely trying year. It was an extreme year about just growth and just evolution as a whole, and intention. So for you specifically, what do you think you learned about yourself mentally and spiritually in 2020, specifically dealing with the pandemic, just dealing with the world just kind of being completely different than what we once knew it as?
Whew.
I know that's a loaded question, and it's early too.
So it's crazy to start the conversation off talking about my dad. 7 years ago, I gave my dad a kidney, which compromised his immune system. And my immune system isn't compromised, but COVID attacks the organs, and it had been known to attack the kidneys, the heart, the lungs the most, right? So the pandemic had me on edge and had my anxiety going. Like I couldn't sleep. It was like, oh my goodness, because now I'm reading reports, our doctors are calling us, letting us know, hey, please stay in, protect yourselves. We really don't know what this is, but we know that, your father's immune system is compromised. And so as a kidney donor, the worst thing, the thing that you play in your head all the time is he okay? Is the kidney okay? Is he doing everything he needs to do? So when I started getting those phone calls and then I started reading the stories, my anxiety was out the roof, like completely out the roof. And I felt confined. Because I'm such a busy person. It's like work. Okay, I gotta get on this car, I gotta do this. I felt confined because it was like the world was shutting down, and it was something that I hadn't done in over 15 years. So the first few months were crazy, but then I had to start dealing with myself in those months.
Yeah.
And I am a sister that's all about go to therapy and talk my problems out, with my therapist. I'm okay with dealing with myself. But when I started getting bored, I started finding things out about myself that I was like, you got to stop this. If you want something different, you got to stop this.
Right.
And it was just like even giving people access to me because I was bored or, you know, sitting up on the phone. It's like, girl, get off this phone. You could be doing something different.
Yeah.
So in that moment, I had to deal with myself mentally. So dealing with myself, you know, some of my own toxic traits that I have, you know, and this is me being very transparent, me wanting things done my way, you know, me not knowing how to sit still and being okay in silence because I'm always thinking about how to get to the next level. I had to just be okay with it.
Yeah.
And then I had to also deal with, it's time to start doing inventory on people in my life. And that was tough because some of those people was like, baby girl gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah.
She ain't for you. She not your friend.
Right.
She's not, this is wait. Or you keep entertaining this person over here who don't even know what to do with you. Like, what are you doing? Like, or don't lose this person over here because really, this is a good person. So I had to deal with so many different thoughts and deal with myself. Of course, now, listen, the pandemic had a girl eating nonstop. I think I cooked so much. That's why I'm in the gym 3 days a week.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
But spiritually, my life was turned upside down. I was still trying to work through the pandemic. I was still getting on flights out. And I mean, I am still doing it to this day if I have to, but I was still traveling, not taking it as serious, came back home from LA from doing a private event and was sick as a dog when I came back. Lost my smell, lost my taste. I said, oh, because I thought, nah, COVID can't get me. I'm healthy. I drink my ginger, my turmeric. I'm good.
Right.
I was really, really sick. So I laid there for 3 days. I was like, yeah, I feel like I'm about to die. I can't breathe. I went to the hospital, tested positive. The same day I tested positive, I got a phone call from my dad that he had also tested positive, and we had no dealings with each other. Like I hadn't seen him in a month.
Wow.
So I'm listening to him breathing, and I know it's hard for me to breathe, but he can barely breathe. And I'm like, Dad, I think you need to go to the ER. I'm calling his kidney doctor. I'm like, this is really bad. And he was like, well, they're not letting us admit people unless, you know, it's really bad. And I said, it is bad. My dad can barely talk. Long story short, my stepmom found my dad in the bed, almost gone, oxygen at 50%.
Wow.
And my father was on a ventilator for 32 days. And he had to get a trach. So for 2 to 3 months, my dad was in ICU at Cleveland Clinic. Then he went to 2 different rehabs before he could come home.
Now, what's the timeline in the pandemic at this time? This is what? Is this like?
We're in July.
Okay, July. Okay.
July. So we're in July.
Yeah.
I'm trying to fight it, but then I'm trying to make decisions for my father. Because one day it's like he's good. The next day is, you know, he's declining. Another day he had a good night. 3 hours later, we might need to think about hospice services. This is probably it. And I'm like, no. So I mentally was going through it. Like I couldn't sleep. I was on medication that didn't allow me to sleep because they were trying to clear my lungs out. And I'm trying to make decisions for my dad. And I didn't have at the time the best relationship with my stepmom because we just didn't, I'm grown. Like we just didn't have a good relationship, but it forced me to get to know her and have a relationship with her and put that's my daddy out, you know, little spoiled girl stuff to the side. So it forced me to do that, but it forced me to dive deeper in God and trust him. Just like I trusted him that I was my dad's kidney donor, I had to trust him to get my dad through something that most people were not making it through in his state. Like he told me, he said, because my dad they had to put him in a coma because he was still awake through the sedation. So they had to induce him in a coma. But he told me, he said, I was watching them carry bodies out in boxes. He was like, and he kept saying like, I don't want the trach just take it out, let me go. Like I was dealing with all of that. So spiritually, I just became a different woman during this pandemic. That's why earlier I told you I had the craziest Monday today. Everything I had been planning for 2 to 3 months for a client all got canceled today. But I got to a point during this pandemic, I'm not letting anything like affect my energy. We just got to figure out another solution.
Right.
So the pandemic taught me a lot about myself. I had to work on myself and it drew me closer to God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. This I heard Dave Chappelle say on a podcast that I listened to him say, he said the most interesting thing about the pandemic is that the pandemic has been a forced self-reflection on everybody's decisions.
Yep.
So you sitting down with yourself and you are face to face with your decisions and you have to deal with that. So
Mm-hmm.
people they living with people they don't really want to be with. Next thing
Mm-hmm.
you know, they looking around, they got kids with people who they don't like. Then you don't like your damn kids. Then you going to the job that you don't like. So it's just this forced constant self-reflection where, we before the pandemic, we were just allowed to just get caught up in our routine and our day-to-day. And we weren't really forced to sit with ourselves, let alone be still. So,
Mm-hmm.
so being caught and being forced to like sit within your decisions, man, that's a hard thing to do. Whether you looked at it intentionally and consciously or not,
Right.
everybody was forced to do so. So I completely resonate because it sounds like your faith was tested. The most.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And I was suffering through that because my mother, who is also, her immune system is compromised due to having cancer and heart failure.
Yeah.
I know for a fact I gave her COVID. And
Mhm.
so she went into the hospital before my dad even went into the
Wow.
hospital.
Wow.
So I was like, if something happened to my mama, oh my God, I ain't gonna be able to, like, I was going through it.
Yeah.
And I really had to deal with myself. I really had to really tap into this. You don't got no control over nothing. You might control what these clients doing here and there, but God is in control. So just sit back and chill. He got this.
Yeah, that control thing is something that I've had to like work out like religiously through therapy,
Mhm.
and I'm still like, matter of fact, the whole thing about control is I'm learning different like seasons of that. I'm learning different
Mhm.
phases of what that looks like for me. Um
Right.
and letting go of control is like the ultimate for me, speaking from my own experience. Letting go of control is like the ultimate liberating feeling. Um,
Hmm.
but it's so scary. But to do that in a pandemic is like it's extra anxiety heightened. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so I completely understand. I mean, for me, in 2020, my mother transitioned in 2020.
Mm.
So
Right.
that in itself, thank you. That in itself was just life changing in itself. My life will never be the same as what it once was.
Right.
Died from pancreatic cancer, so her immune system was compromised as well. She didn't pass away from COVID, but still, I also had my child, literally my first son, literally a week and a half before the pandemic broke out. So here I am, parenting my first child. My
Mhm.
mother is terminally ill. I want to see her because I know she's struggling, but at the same time, her immune system is compromised. So it's all of these, challenges that's just kind of being brought up, and
Mhm.
so much control that I do not have. Um,
Right.
so I had to, kind of adapt and just like, as things begin to just kind of transpire that I had no control over, I had no choice but to take a step back and just allow God to kind of like, um, take the wheel.
Right.
You know what I'm
Literally.
saying? So I completely understand that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
So yeah, that's what the pandemic did for me.
yeah.
And I'm still working through it because today I was frustrated. Like, can this just be over already? Like, you messing up my money, you messing up the stuff I got going on. So, but I did have to sit back. As much as I complained about what happened earlier, I had to sit back and say, okay, you gonna learn this lesson another way. Like, and I had to thank God. I had to say, Lord, you know what? I thank you for giving me clients that still pay me through a pandemic because they didn't have to. I thank you for keeping my family alive because it's so many people. I have friends who lost their parents through this,
Yeah.
you know, And I just had to take a moment and get out of my self-pity just to show God, like, I am thankful for all of these things that you did that you didn't have to do for me. So yeah, the pandemic, it made me really deal with myself. Like really deal with myself. And I was always a person that I would kind of go in the shell if I didn't want to talk about something and just dive myself into work. And it got me to a point where it's like you can't keep running away from stuff and people and situations. You got to deal with them, at hand. You got to talk it through. And it makes me better in my business with my business partner. We get a little irritable with people, with each other. We talk it through. Okay, hey, moving forward, can you not do that? I didn't like how that went down. So it has made me a better person. I look forward to seeing who I will be in the next year or so due to this pandemic.
So have you gotten to a place where you have appreciated the pandemic? Like you taken what has come with it, and it's like, you know what, I needed that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I needed that time to myself because as much as I had to deal with myself, and it was days I was waking up like, girl, you messed up. But I needed that time to relax. I needed that time where people weren't just calling me, oh, I need this done. What about this? When we doing it, like I needed that time to myself. I needed that time to sleep in. I wake up 5:30, 6 o'clock every single morning. I go to sleep 9:30, 10 o'clock every single day because I know I'm a grouch when I'm sleepy. But I needed that time to stay up at night and watch movies and kind of get my creative mind flowing. Like I needed that. Like, and the pandemic actually, it gave me time to work on my personal business. So I started setting myself up, and I feel like I made more money during the pandemic, and it wasn't no scams or nothing. But
Right.
I felt like I was so focused. It was like a laser focus where it allowed me to do things that I should have done 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, I try to live by the belief system of everything being in divine order.
Mhm.
And despite me going through a hard transition, there was so much that did go quote unquote right for me, and there was so
Right.
much that that happened in the pandemic in the year 2020 that I needed that. So despite all of it may look like negativity, man, all of that stuff was worthwhile, and everything still turned out to happen just the way it was supposed to. And I feel more clear in my mind, in my
Mhm.
spirit, and lighter within my spirit and my heart than I ever have. So it very much was necessary. Listen, you mentioned a key word earlier.
Mhm.
When we first started, you said the word exposure. Um,
Mhm.
early, and you mentioned your parents, you mentioned your father, you mentioned your mother. Who was your earliest influences or just earliest exposure, just entrepreneurship as a whole? Where was that spawn from? Was that your father? Was that your mother? Or was it,
That was
was it somebody else?
that was so there were three people I would say, or four. So that was both of my dads.
Okay.
So my stepdad, who I never call him step, but just to explain it to you,
Mm-hmm.
he's been in my life since I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
He does hair, but just a pure marketing genius on what he does. Very innovative, owned hair salons. So he gave me the entrepreneurship. My father gave me entrepreneurship, and my mother just knew how to run their businesses. When she was married to my father, she knew how to run it. Married to, my dad too, she runs the businesses. Anytime they open a new salon, and now it's a family salon. Before it was just them two. So now it's, you know, all of us. But anytime they open it, my mother just knew how to run it. She was very classy. She knew how to, set order. Um, she didn't like chaos. So there was always order set in businesses. But my grandfather, he was a hunter. He was retired. Growing up, he was retired. I was spoiled. But I watched him have like one of the craziest businesses that I would see him like rake up so much money. And he was a hunter. So before Thanksgiving, it would start like around September, October. My grandfather would hunt 6, 7 days a week. and he would go out there and hunt deer, raccoon, rabbits,
Damn.
come in the backyard, skin them, freeze them, and then cook them for people for Thanksgiving.
Mm.
And the way he prepared them was just beautiful.
Mhm.
And it would be like, so you just made all that money off of going out and hunting?
Wow.
And it was a real business, to the point where I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was like, yeah, my mom was talking about this old man who used to make these raccoons, and he would stuff the yams in the mouth. And I'm like, yeah, that was my grandfather. He was like the raccoon man. And he would sell the raccoons from, at depending on the size, $75 to $150 a raccoon.
Damn. Yeah, he was clean. He was cleaning up.
And he was cleaning up because he was getting so many. And I remember him coming home. It'll be a truck full of, like, he had like a pickup truck. It'll be a truck full of raccoons. So he just had crazy work ethic. I mean, all the way up until he couldn't really do it anymore. And then he also, outside of the holiday season, he would breed hound dogs and sell them 3,000-4,000 a pop. And we would go in the backyard. He said, if you go back and clean the kennels up, I'll pay you. So, I mean, I really wasn't cleaning the kennels up. I was just back there with my cousins,
Right.
but I always got paid. But I would see him make so much money, and he would breed them. And he had like 18, 19 hound dogs in the back off of St. Clair, right in the hood. And we had a swimming pool in the backyard. So,
Wow.
so yeah, so that's where I get my entrepreneurship. And that's where I've been exposed to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And see, and that's why I asked that question, because you could tell, and I think you would agree with this, that you could tell that you being exposed so early on, there are direct steps that you ultimately follow just from being exposed to these things,
Yes.
unconsciously. So that's super important.
Yes.
That's very powerful. So like, but I know ultimately, like you said, you touched on this a few times as well. You said, man, I knew I was going to be in the music industry. You ended up being a road manager for Gerald Levert at 16 years old. You done already told me you met Pac when you was
Right.
4 years old. Now
Yeah, I
you
was 6 or 7.
now you working with Gerald Levert when you 16, 17. Like, first off, how does that happen? And second off, like, what did you learn from that experience?
My dad, both of my dads. So I have a cousin who was in a group that Gerald, founded, which was the Root Boys, so Joe Little. Both of my dads had a relationship with Gerald. I was doing my senior project in high school. And at the time, I used to watch Behind the Music on VH1.
Yeah,
And I
that
was
was the
like,
show. That was the show.
Daytwan Thomas from Vibe magazine, who's now a friend. I used to watch him when I was younger, but he's now a friend. I used to watch him like narrate it, and he would talk about everybody in the industry. And I would look at the titles of what people did, and I'm like, a recording engineer, maybe I'll try that because I'm a woman and it's mainly men and I'm pretty. Like, this was my thought. So I knew at one point, no, you need to do marketing because you're marketing yourself already. And I forget, they interviewed somebody's recording engineer, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. That's what I'm gonna do my senior project with. So I told both of my dads, and they were like, okay. And so I told Joe, because he was also operating out of the studio that Gerald owned. And I said, hey, do you think I can come to the studio and do my senior project? And he was like, yeah. He was like, I'm gonna talk to Gerald. Like, yeah, it'll be cool. So I'm working every day with all men. So you already know, it's like, and Gerald will walk in, he'd be like, hey, leave her alone. Like, I know her people.
Probably was dealing with creeps and all type of shit.
Yeah, leave her alone. She
Yeah.
family. We got to protect her.
Right.
So every single day I got up. I had to be at the studio at 10 a.m. I got up, and whatever they needed me to do, I did. And he was getting ready for the tour with Luther Vandross. He was opening up for Luther. I think Michelle Williams was on that tour and somebody else, but he was coming on right before Luther. And they had me like calling the venues, asking the venues, do you have this equipment? And I'm like, this is boring. Like, this is not fun. But one of Gerald's cousins who handled production said, hey, meet me at the studio. And it was an awkward time, a time that I'm not typically there. And I'm like, I ain't going to this meeting. I don't feel like it. I'm my senior project over. And I didn't end up going. So they wanted me to do wardrobe. So to handle the wardrobe for the background singers, the band, and Gerald. So I didn't end up going. So I missed out on that opportunity. And that was one of the lessons that I carry with me forever.
Which is
Like,
what?
when somebody calls you, just because you don't know what they want or you don't feel like it, just go, because your blessing is probably on the other end. You know, I was so young, like, I want to hang out with my friends. And they were really trying to open a door for me where it was like, hey, we're going to give you this job. I was preparing to go to Paris like right after graduation. So I'm like, I'm just trying to get ready. And so I missed out on that particular job, which paid like $1,600 a week, right? And it's probably a good thing that I missed out on that, because I probably wouldn't have ended up in going to college at a certain point, and I probably would have looked for another job doing what I had done for Gerald if I had taken that job. So it was like when I found out what happened, that he was like, I gave the job to somebody else because we going on tour. You didn't come down here. And I'm like, oh, Ivan, why you ain't just call me? He was like, that wasn't a call. And so I learned that valuable lesson. And then they ended up finding me what they called a gopher. They said, whatever we ask you to go for,
you do it.
you do it.
Right.
And I was like, okay, how much is it paying? They said nothing. I'm like, what? Like, are you serious? So I ended up saying, okay, forget it. Because I remember exposure is everything. I just need the experience. Just let me in the door and I'm gonna make my way into getting some money. So I started doing spot dates for them. Like I would, or dates that were close to Cleveland, because I'm still kind of technically a minor. So I was the baby of the group. And then I started, okay, we're going to have you go to DC with us. Okay, you're going to come to LA and do the Soul Train Awards with us. And so I started getting those opportunities where I could travel with them. And I still technically was a gopher, but then I was like, hey, the road manager need help. Listen, this is how I can help better it. And I just start doing things that I could say, if they're not on time, you can charge them a fee. And then we should send this out to everybody to let them know what time they should be. And he was like, I mean, if you feel like doing all that, go ahead. And I started making a way, and I started making money. And a guy named Leonard Brooks, who is Gerald's brother-in-law, but also managed him, really kind of took me by the hand and was like, I'm gonna show you how to get out here and get it. And when I moved to LA, because I then moved to LA after the tour was over and Gerald was kind of like settled down because he's done promoting this album, they always called me for gigs when they came out. So it was like, okay, you in LA, you're gonna be Gerald's, assistant for today. So that was like my first like getting my hands dirty in the music industry.
So let's go back a little bit. How does a 16, 17-year-old young lady have the discernment to say, you know what, they not offering me nothing monetarily right now, but the experience itself is going to be extremely valuable? Where does that level of discernment come from? Because listen, me 16, 17, it's no way I'm doing it. It's no way somebody could have told me, do this job for me and you're not getting paid and you're going to do whatever I say. Like, you know what I'm saying? So where does that come from me and you? Where did you get that from?
My parents already been exposed to it, being exposed and having a view of what, at a young age, of what I wanted to do. But then furthermore, just confidence in myself. And that's why it's so important to build confidence in your kids, because I had confidence like, all right, y'all ain't paying me this week, but y'all gonna pay me because I know I'm good. I know, like, I have that personality. You're going to love me. Like, you're not, I'm going to make it to where you can't get rid of me. And to be completely honest, I don't know if I told you this, but to be completely honest, I hated school. I'm like, I'm not going to nobody's 4-year college. I got to get it out here. And my mom always taught me relationships are everything. So it was build these relationships with these folks over here. So you really don't have to go to school, because I hated school. Like, I didn't like to apply myself in school. Now, when it comes to business, I'll apply myself all day long. If I don't know something, I'll Google it. I'll sit on YouTube. I'll call somebody. But I hated school. And I just felt like I watched Diddy say he was a C average student in school. And, you know, if you go to school, great. If you don't, it's about relationships. He said that on Behind the Music too. True
entrepreneur.
Yes. And so that was my thing. You got to build a relationship with the people. You got to make them love you. You have to offer them something that where they need you. And that's what I did. So I was exposed to it. So it was that exposure. And then it was that confidence that my mother instilled in me. It was that exposure that I got from my father, that confidence my mother instilled in me. And then just watching, you know, my grandparents, because I'm an old soul. So I would sit around my grandparents and ask questions all day long. And that's how I found out.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, that's how I found out about, okay, who am I? Like, where I come from, why I act this way. Okay, I get that from my grandfather. Okay, I know where I get the bossiness from. So it was those things that my parents instilled in me. And I think just from me being an old soul, I was one of those people, if you tell me don't do this because X, Y, and Z will happen, oh, I'm gonna listen to you because I don't want to make the same mistake you made. So I learned from your mistakes so I don't have to go through that. And that's kind of, I think that's what got me to that place at 16, 17 years old, knowing how to discern.
What you learn from Gerald Levert? You know, we talking about, again, we saying his name, but people who know, legend. You know what I'm saying? Icon, like, you know, just unique, just legend all the way around. So what'd you learn from him?
He did what he had to do to keep his fans. His work ethic. If that man if we had to go out there and get 4 dozen of roses to get them women screaming at the front of the stage and going crazy, that's what we did. If he had to roll around to just like get that, oh my God moment, that's what he did. He never half stepped when he touched that stage, whether it was an arena or whether it was a theater. He never half stepped. Like, when I tell you, I'm not just saying this because I worked with him, but I loved watching him perform. I would sit on the side of the stage like, I love watching him perform because he was such an amazing performer. And I think he also got that from his father, because his father was another level too, you know?
So the OJs, man, come on now, that's listen, we talking about him, but this is legendary stuff right now.
Yes, and I was able to have that experience. And so he never half stepped when he was on stage. He gave his all in everything he did. Like, even when he was cussing the team out, like, he was pissed, but he never half stepped, and he wanted everybody to win around him. You know, I can't remember what song they were writing. I don't even know if it was a hit. I can't really remember, but he was writing a song for someone and they couldn't think of a word, right? He might have been in there with like Mickey Howard. They couldn't think of a word, like the next word.
Howard, another underrated legend for real. You dropping a lot of names and you just saying it real subtle, like, and people may not get it, but I get it. I'm with you.
And so I'm sitting there and I just say, why don't y'all use this word? And everybody looked at me. He was saying, yeah, we're going to do that. But he looked at me in disgust. And I'm like, did I do something wrong? So he had his cousin pull me out And, he kind of gave his cousin that look, and his cousin's name was Ivan. Ivan said, "Don't ever do that." I'm like, "What did I do?" They was stumbling. He was like, "Cause now we got to give you credit on the song. You can't sit in there and give people words to use because now we got to give you credit." And I was like, "Oh, well, give me credit then." He was like, "Then we got to break down percentages." I said, "Okay, listen, I won't do it again. I apologize. Y'all got to give me credit. It's cool." So I went back into the studio, and Gerald was like, "Don't do that no more." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "I'm sorry." He was like, "It's okay. You didn't know." But he was like, "Did Ivan explain it to you?" And I said, "Yeah, he did." He said, "Okay." He was like, "It ain't no problem giving you credit, but when we already got the credits broken down, I just don't want it to get sticky." And I'm like, "I'm just happy to be in here learning of how he was writing. He was just writing the song and he was singing it and flowing." And I was like, "This is really cool." So I think his work ethic and just his love for his people, you know, I wish he was still around because I know he would still be making timeless music.
Did you ever deal with any level of like you felt guilty for like some of the privileges that you had from from your parents and your father, ultimately exposing you to things, but literally assisting you in your development, but putting you in relationships with these powerful people and these unique and these legendary people? Did you ever deal with any level of like, what, I may not belong here, or like, I didn't work hard for, like, was it any level did you ever deal with any of that at all?
I still to this day,
Mm,
to this
mm,
day.
yeah.
Um, I can be in a group chat and it's everybody like, "Oh, what you doing, Patrice?" "Oh, no, just going to work." Because I don't want to sound like I'm bragging or my job better than anybody's. Like, I can't just drop and be like to my friends, "Oh, did y'all see I got my client in People magazine and he just proposed this?" I can't do that.
You tone it
People
down.
looking at me like, so to this day, it's times where I feel guilty. It's times where, you know, I always had a drive, and then I have very high taste in things. Now I'm a humble pie now, but where I lay my head when I'm out of town and the food that I eat every day,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a little exquisite.
You investing. You invested in it. I ain't nothing wrong with it.
And then I've been exposed to certain things. So if I go to an event, like, I mean, you might see it on my face, like, ugh. But I've been
This ain't
exposed.
it. I know this ain't it.
Yeah. So I have always tried to kind of bring it down. And I don't like to dim my light or dumb anything down for anybody, but there are times where, yes, I feel a little guilty.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead, finish.
not that my job is better than my cousin who's a nurse or my sister who is a hairstylist, because we clearly need them. We need everybody, right?
Correct. Correct.
I think the industries that I work in have just been glorified.
Yep.
Um, so yes, I do deal with guilt, and I deal with how do I make this sound like I'm not bragging, but I want to tell people what I'm doing too. So yes.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And the reason I asked that question is because listen, the goal is to always make the person who come behind you job a little bit easier. Like, what I'm saying? I think that's something that we can all agree on at the most simplistic level.
Right.
But that is a concern that, I think that especially us as black folks have. I mean, when we talking about the impact of socialization, the impact of racism, we ultimately talking about things that make us dim our value down.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just such an interesting concept that your parents and your people, they work real hard to ultimately help the people who come after them, which will be you. And
Right.
you put in these legendary moments at such a young age. I would imagine that is a lot for a young person to deal with. And
Right.
especially I can only imagine being a woman in this industry at a
Oh,
at a young age.
my fathers, oh my goodness, their brains were wrecked. because it's like, you got to be careful around these men.
Yeah.
These men looking at you like, and I'm like, there is nothing I can do. I've been a shapely woman and little girl since I was born. There's nothing I can do. So I became I was very conservative. Like as a young girl, I would wear baggier clothes to cover, my bottom half because I had hips, I had a butt, like, I was covering that. And still to this day, I cover it, just out of respect, not to put myself in a situation where an older man who may be cool with my fathers approach me. And then, nowadays women are going and they showing everything. They're buying their bodies and, they're showing it. I ain't knocking nobody. That's not my thing. I was blessed with it, but I kind of grew up trying to protect myself, but also protect, my father's fears.
Yeah.
And if I hear this nigga and I'm like,
already know. already know.
Okay, they not.
Right.
And if that happened, you tell me. And I'm just like, I'm not, because you're going to go bunkers. Like, but I was just the way I was taught to carry myself because, I did work around these men, and I worked around men who were powerful. I worked around men who could make a decision for me in a second. And, that was one thing my mom taught me, like, don't sleep with nobody to get something done.
That's
Don't
right.
be that girl.
Yeah.
So yes, I felt guilt. There was I never feared for my life because I felt like people protected me. I would definitely big brother, little brother, everybody around me so that they didn't try to hit on me. Not that that always worked, but yes, it was.
I'm sure that didn't always work.
Yeah, it didn't always work. But sometimes I would, big brother them and they would be like,
I'm trying to be big bro. Why you put me over there?
Yeah. So,
right.
But yes, it's very hard being a woman in this industry still to this day in sports. I actually ended up in the sports industry because Gerald died.
How did you pivot into that?
So maybe about 6 or 7 months before he passed, I knew he was getting ready to go to Africa. And he had told me about to drop this new album. He was like, "You going out on tour?" I was out at a club in Cleveland. And I'm like, yes, because now I'm in Columbus taking courses, right? I lived in California for a year, came back to Ohio because it was too much for me. I'm in Columbus taking courses, came home to go out, and I ran into him. And so I'm like, yes, get me out of Columbus. I can make some money. And maybe it was about a month later, he passed away. I was doing a photo shoot and found out he had passed away. And immediately it was like, what the hell am I going to do now?
And Gerald was young too. He wasn't even 50 years old. He was in his
No, he wasn't 50 yet. He was young.
Yeah.
He was young. He had died from an accidental overdose. He had the flu, so he was taking medicine for the flu, and then he took something else. I can't quite remember what happened, but he took something else, and then his cousin found him deceased.
Wow.
In the house. So
rest in peace to the legend Gerald Levert, man. Rest in peace, man. That's again.
I could have worked for him forever. Like, honestly, that's just how fun it was. His fans were fun. Being on the road with him was fun. I could have worked with him forever. Like, and that to me was like my goal. And that's why I said his death is how I got into sports, because I was so down about his death. An old friend of mine was like, listen, we in Columbus, Ohio. Your best friend is on the football team. We're going to get out here and we're going to get this money with them. So it was like a college girl. And I'm like, okay, so this is the business I want to do. I formed a business. I'm like, we're going to do events, but if we're doing events for these athletes, they got to give back in the community. And this was prior to them making it. I had a few friends who went on to the NFL, prior to me building this business. Will Smith, who God rest his soul.
Legend, another legend.
New Orleans Saints. Me and him became very, very close. And I kept telling him, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And he was like, you can do it. Like, just do it. Donte Whiter, who, you know, he was a little bit younger than me. He was about a year younger than me, but he came to school early. So he ended up being drafted. Troy Smith, Ted Ginn, all of these guys are there. And it's like, I know them. Will Allen, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like I knew them. So they would call on me and say, hey, I want you to do this. Donte ended up calling me and saying, I'm gonna get y'all Troy Smith's Heisman party. Cause at this time I'm running a nightclub in college, and he got us the Heisman party. And when I tell you, it was like an amazing party. We didn't get paid. And I was like, what did I learn from this? Like, have everything in writing, get a contract, get a deposit before. Like, it taught me so much. Because as savvy as I was at a young age, I was just taking people's word, like, you're not gonna play me. I wasn't setting my rate prior to accepting something, because I'm like, I just want to get it. Like, I want to say I did it. So I didn't end up getting paid from that. And I was like, crush. Like, y'all ain't gonna pay us at least $1,000. Like, y'all just spent all this money, y'all not gonna pay us nothing. And it was just, Troy was transitioning from someone who thought they were going to be the agents to the actual agents. So it was, you know, it was just a lot. I had to learn a lot in college, but I did. And I remember calling Will Smith and I said, listen, this is the business that I'm going to start. Can you help us out? He was like, what's your bank account number? He was like, you better start this business. You better not be going out of town. You better not be going shopping. You better start this business. And 3 days later, I had $5,000 in my account.
Wow.
And that's how I started the business. And then it just started picking up because I became serious. Like, okay, we're going to do this event planning business and we're going to make sure everybody gives back. But that's how I transitioned into working with athletes.
And so Tough Love was ultimately started after Gerald Levert's transition.
Yes.
And you using a valuable lesson that your mother gave you, which is utilizing and leveraging your relationships with these people that you knew. And it is started to become an event management and just an event space after having an experience where you got played from doing a party.
Yep.
So here we are again, everything being in divine order. Everything is very much, connected, and everything is very much useful.
Yep. Everything.
So how did as you do begin to like build your business and you do begin to build Tough Love, like talk a little bit about like what some of those events were and like, again, what you learned in those experiences.
So once I began to build Tough Love, we knew that we had the name Tough Love, and Tough Love came from my mother was very heavy in the community. And I remember seeing her in the inner cities, like she would write grants and then she would implement these programs and she would lead these programs. And I remember saying, Mom, why do these kids love you so much? You so dang on mean to them.
Y'all, they don't know the real.
And she like, because I give them something they don't get at home. Right. And I'm like, what? Because you mean, like, if you was yelling at me like this, I'm jumping on you. Now I got to fight your kids. But they loved her. Like, she would cuss them out. Like, if you don't get your little fat ass, I'm going to throw your ass out in the lake. Like, don't you talk to my child like that. Like, she would just go in, right? And she was like, because I give them tough love. Some of these kids ain't never heard I love you.
Right.
Some of these kids not used to being corrected.
100%.
Then when I would hear her like up late at night getting phone calls, young girls like, my stepfather just raped me, or I'm pregnant, help me, Mrs. Blue. Like, and she would be like, get up out of her bed and get to these kids. So when I started Tough Love, and I had a partner at the time, I started Tough Love and we were trying to figure out what the heck is our name going to be? And I'm like, how do we want to work with our clients? Like, what do we want it to be like, in our business? And we kept saying family oriented. I'm like, okay, well, we can't be the yes people. Like, I don't want to be the do boy, do girl type, staff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, tough love. Like, that's how we were raised. So that's what we're going to give to our clients, because in time, they're going to love us forever because we didn't tell them yes, or we corrected them when they were wrong, and we always have their back. And that's how Tough Love started. It was just strictly events. Donte Whitner called us and said, listen, I never had a birthday party, which was a lie. He said, I never had a birthday party. His mom was like, I got pictures when we was singing happy birthday to him. And he was like, I want to do it really big. And I'm like, okay, what's your budget? He was like, it's no budget. I said, whoa. And I didn't know how to charge at that time. I'm like, do I charge him $1,500 for no budget? Like, what do I do? And he was like, I want to have an all-white party. I want a tiger. I want to have a party in the mall. I want singers to come. Like, I just want an amazing weekend. And so I'm like, okay, well, who do you want? He was like, I don't know, figure it out. So I started saying, all right, who do I want to work with? Who do I want to get to know? Who do I want to say was there at this party? And the first person that I'm like, we got to have Monica come sing happy birthday. So that's where my relationship with Monica started, was at Donte Whitner's birthday party in 2007. And, you know, it blossomed and bloomed into now she's one of my best friends. And so that's how I would position myself. Who do I want to work with? Who do I want to know? You know, how would this add value to me? How would this add value to my client? So that was a party. It was 3 days. It was a bowling event. It was a birthday party number 1, birthday party number 2. And it was just, I mean, people still talk about that party to this day. We had a white tiger on a white carpet. And that was the event that really took me to another level. Like, I could tell people, if you don't have a budget of this, I can't do it.
Right.
It gave me exposure. So now, okay, his teammates are like, okay, those girls did your party. Okay, what else do they do? And then I was getting ready to move to Atlanta, and he was like, no, stay in Cleveland, because now I want you to handle all of my stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, all of your stuff, like what? He was like, my PR, my events, my community outreach. And he was like, what y'all need to stay? And I'm like, well, I was getting ready to move to Atlanta. And he was like, nah, I'll put y'all in an apartment. I'll give y'all the money for it. You can furnish it, but just stay here. So I literally, for 3 seasons, drove from Cleveland to Buffalo every Sunday for a game.
He was playing with the Bills.
He was playing with the Bills. Then he just went through some different things. So I'm learning PR as I'm working with him, because now he's getting into some altercations off the field. He's getting tased and things are happening. People are robbing him. So now I'm dealing with it, and I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm like, this is not what I signed up for. I'm dealing with the family. I'm dealing with, you know, mistakes that he's making off the field. Like, I'm really like that Olivia Pope for him. And I learned a lot about myself in that time, because I'm like, I'm doing more than what I'm paid for. I'm not supposed to do this, because now I can't even bring another client in, because I am solely his everything. Like, I need you to go, I need you to go do this with my mom. It was just a lot. It was a lot for a 23, 24-year-old. But he was a blessing. I cannot take away from that. He was a blessing. He taught me so much. He introduced us to other players. He gave us so many different opportunities to learn and be put in different situations. So I always am thankful for that opportunity to work closely with him.
Yeah, listen, I always say that my greatest blessing is the people that I've been connected to. You done took yours up to another level. You know what I'm saying? The people that you've been connected to, but it's a beautiful thing. Especially because it sounds like it's all about, you know, having genuine relationships first. And then just utilizing, listen, let's figure out how we can really get some money, and let's figure out, you know, what it is I want to do, what it is that I want to do, and let's make it work. Listen, you talked to me a little bit about this, you know, on the phone earlier. You said, man, the success hit early. You know, you was making a lot of good money, a lot of success early on, young, but ultimately a lot of success so fast to a young person is not always good, and some will argue that it's never really good.
Right.
And you know, that's when the depression and things like that kicked in. Talk to me a little bit about just like the experiences of success so early and how that ultimately led and snowballed into, you know, you just having, again, dealing with some depression and just dealing with some other things as well.
So success hit really fast. There came a point where, you know, we stopped working with Donte. And it had to do with, I don't think we were mature enough to communicate, hey, I'm working with this other person. Monica had called. She said, Treese, I need you to cast my video. I need Terrell. Terrell said yes for her, I forget which Everything to Me video. 2 days before the video shoot, he backed out of it. As he's backing out of it and I'm getting a phone call, I see Chad Johnson walking past me. Now, I've had interaction with Chad before. Like, we knew each other. We had each other's numbers. I said, okay, I got the perfect person. I'll call you back. So I called his marketing manager at the time, who I was cool with and who I had worked with other athletes. And I said, listen, I need Chad to do me a favor. I wanted to reach out to you first, you know, before I call him. Can we get this done? Chad turned around because he must have saw him. He turned around. We were in Miami for Super Bowl, and he was like, I got you. Like, let's make it happen. We were on a private jet. That was my first time on a private jet. I knew in that moment, I'm like, oh, my life is changing. And so from there, Monica asked me, hey, you want to go on tour with me? And I'm like, oh, this is that music opportunity I wanted again. Yeah, this is it right here. And they announced the video release, you know, on 106 and Park back in the days, they used to have the video releases, and Monica shouted me out. And then 3 days later, Chad was on ESPN in Disney World, and they asked him about they asked him how he got in the video, and he shouted me out. Next thing I know, all my steady clients was firing me because they like, okay, now she about to get caught up in, you know, in Chad. And Chad is the biggest NFL player at this time. He's just been said, USA Today had just said he was the most influential person on Twitter. So I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. I called Chad crying like, y'all done messed me up. And he said, well, what happened? I said, all my guys fired me.
I'm
too lit. Like,
I'm too lit, Chad.
He like, they did? So he was like, I'm gonna call you back. And I ended up talking to Monica. She was like, well, I knew that was gonna happen, but you got a job on tour. It's all good. I'm like, nah, like, I know you can't pay me enough. Like, at that time, I'm making probably about $8,000 to $10,000 a month. So I'm like, nah, like, this ain't gonna work. And I'm panicking. Chad ended up calling me back like, baby girl, how much money they paying you? How much you getting paid a month? And I'm like $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Like, that's a lot of money for a 25-year-old woman. No kids. So he like, oh, okay, that'll be in your bank account every month. Just tell me, send Barry the information. That was the assistant that was working in the office. And I'm like, but what you want me to do? He was like, we'll figure it out as we go along. And I'm like, oh. So I started paying attention to Twitter and just how people were amazed about him. And I started seeing the opportunities. So you know how I always could see the opportunities even at a young age. And I said, okay. So I proposed to him, you don't even got to pay me nothing a month. I'm going to start tweeting. You start reposting me and tweeting me, telling people I'm the go-to person. And you don't got to pay me that a month. But what I will do is I will do your bookings. So at the time, his hourly rate was $25,000 an hour for an appearance. So we doing 4 or 5 of them easily.
Right.
You know, then I have
you making commission off of these or
commission. So if we doing 4 or 5 of them a month, then he's still like looking out.
And what's your percentage on the commission?
At the time, it started off at 25%. And then
that's good money.
Yeah. And then I was like, man, we doing so much of this. Just give me 20%. Because I always wanted to be fair. Cause I'm like, somebody else can come up and be like, I'm only gonna charge you 10%. Yeah. So, but he's just a very loyal person. So I always wanted to be fair. Now I'm on a roll with Monica as well, working her tour. Chad is letting me book him. Then at the time, he's now dating Evelyn. So now I'm managing Evelyn as well. She getting 10 pop every city we going into. And then I'm working them together. So the money started coming fast and on a different level. Now I'm being exposed to major networks.
Right.
It's taking me everywhere. I'm learning stuff that I didn't know before. It's coming in so fast that I can get up and go out of town when I want to, you know, and I can do things that I want to. And now my taste is different in food. I'm eating at 5-star restaurants 3 times a day, you know. Then I'm stressed out because there's stuff going on behind the scenes, right? So I'm drinking more. And when I'm stressed out, I go to the beach and I drink and I spend money. And I'm really blowing money fast, like no lie. Thinking, okay, next month we got 5 gigs, I'll get it back. And my dads would be like, save your money, make sure your credit is right. And I'm like, the hell with y'all, I'm good.
You're right, yeah.
And I think I want to say an incident happened that I won't speak on, but an incident happened. And I was like, oh, this shit gonna end soon. Mm-hmm. I gotta get this figured out. Mm-hmm. And I remember just not being happy. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't Chad. And I'm very open about this. It was more so Evelyn. Like I saw things going left. And she was a fun person, no lie. She was a fun person, but I just saw things going left. And I was like, I'm about to be out of here because I don't agree with y'all getting married. I don't agree with y'all doing a show. Like I was thinking about his children and I was thinking about his career on the field. And I knew it was affecting him already. And so the moment I voiced that, I knew she was going to have me out. And that incident happened and I was out. And I remember just telling Chad, like, hey, I'm going to be here when you need me. Because I knew he would need me again. I saw where it was going. So we didn't talk for maybe 2 or 3 years. And straight out of jail, he called me and was like, I need you. Mm-hmm. And I didn't hold a grudge or anything because my mother always taught me the same grace that one day you'll need, you have to give to other people.
That's right.
And sometimes you're the only example of forgiveness or you're the only example of being like Jesus. Mm-hmm. So you have to forgive and move forward. Right. And I expressed to him, I was hurt, like thought we was like riders for life. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, he was very apologetic, but I got in there with the trenches with him. I said, listen, I get it. The money's not coming in no more. But however we have to do to help fix you, like, let's do it. But I was spiraling because prior to him calling me, that depression started sinking in because now it's like, I put my life into y'all. I, shut down other clients because I was making so much money with you all. I literally, my world revolved around Chad and Evelyn. And so when I stopped working with them, I moved back home. I'm sleeping on my mother's floor. Like I'm crying every day. I just felt so depleted because I had put so much into them. And that taught me a lesson. Don't put all your eggs in one basket and not to put people on a pedestal because everybody changes. And when you're no longer beneficial to people, they will throw you away.
Yeah.
So that was that moment where I was able to deal with myself. That was like a pandemic moment. Mm-hmm. I was able to deal with myself. And that's where the real strong relationship with God was established.
Yeah. So what were you doing with Chad and Evelyn? Were you managing them? Was it all PR stuff? Like what was the day-to-day
things look like? PR, whatever Chad and Evelyn needed.
Yeah.
With Chad, it had become like a sister and brother relationship. hey, I need you to go do X, Y, and Z and move this around. And like, yeah, it was more of a brother and sister relationship. So yeah, so whatever needed to be done for them is what, you know, I did. Whether it was fix it. I was a fixer for them.
So,
you know.
so how, the money is coming in, the success is high. You getting access to different people. You've been exposed to different things that you never were exposed to. You really living a lifestyle that a lot of people on the outside looking in would love to have. But you touched on it. You said you wasn't happy. You know what I'm saying? So like ultimately, again, you said you end up going back home, sleeping on your mom's floor, but then you said you seeked out somebody professionally. You ultimately went to therapy and counseling. Where, again, I asked you this question earlier, but where did the discernment of going to counseling come from? Because now we live in a society today in 2021 where therapy is much more on the front lines and is much more talked about and being part of our natural conversations more so, especially for Black folks, more than this has ever been.
Right.
You talking about 2015, 2016, 2017. This still wasn't like a typical thing to do. So like, where did that come? How did you get into counseling from there?
So I went and when I moved back home, I said, I'm not working with no more athletes. I'm not working with no more famous people.
Yeah.
I hate everybody. I'm going to give me a 9-to-5 job. Yeah.
I was out there with the devil.
Look, I sat there at my desk every day.
Yeah.
And a girl came up to my desk and she was like, I knew you did something else. I knew it. And I was like, what you talking about? And she was like, I knew it. That's why you sit over here. You don't talk to people. I knew you was different. I knew it was something about you. And I'm really like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And she was like, she showed me her phone. She went like this. And I looked over, I said, she was watching Basketball Wives.
You was on Basketball Wives in the cut.
and I went in the cut. I had a whole speaking piece. And she was like, I kept saying, I've seen this girl somewhere before. And she was like going around our department and telling everybody. And I'm like, Jesus, okay. So then people had, questions like, well, and so I would like sneak out of work or I would be handling business like outside. And I ended up telling my boss, because he was like the manager of the department. So he was like, so you work with athletes? Because now they're Googling my name, right? And you see me attached to Chad or you see me attached to Donte. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I'm trying to be very modest. Yeah, that was an old life, but I'm not doing it.
Private jet 6 months ago, but y'all,
Yeah. I'm not doing it anymore, but yeah. And he was like, he found it very cool, but I saw them treat me differently, some in a great way. Some was like, yeah, you don't want to come into work? No worries, Patrice. Right. Can I get tickets? Like, and then some, it was, just because you do this, don't think you about to get away with this, or very hard on me. Like, so I said, okay, this is not going to last long. And my grandmother, so this is what happened. My grandfather passed. My mother's heart failed. She went into heart failure. My grandmother passed a few weeks later. And I'm just operating. I'm planning funerals like, okay, not crying, not doing anything. I'm just operating. Went through some turbulence, and my mother, she finds out she has breast cancer. Thought my world was wrecked. I'm like, dang, my dad just went through this. Now this is happening. My grandmother passed, my grandfather. It was just like one thing after another, gut punches after gut punches. I'm still also living in fear. Like, now I'm working this 9 to 5. I know this is not for me. I'm not knocking a 9 to 5 at all, but I know this is not for me. This is not my purpose. I know what I'm supposed to be doing, but that situation from Evelyn and Chad had me so scarred. I was like living in fear from living in my purpose. and actually doing the work that I know I was put here to do. So when my grandmother passed, 6 weeks before she passed, she told me, you need to quit that job. And she called me on my work phone and told me this. You need to quit that job. You need to write your book. You need to get back to working because you're much more happier when you're working with good clients. So I'm like, you can't call my job saying that. So she ended up passing. The day that my grandmother passed, I was at her bedside, and one of the girls from the job called me and said, yo, they just laid us off today. And I was like crying, but I was happy because I said, my grandmother just said she wanted me to quit this job. And the day that she passed, literally 15 minutes after she took her last breath, y'all calling me telling me we just got laid off.
Right.
And I'm like, again, divine order. So that happened. My mom has a mastectomy, and boom, Will Smith gets killed. Now, I talked to Will the day he got killed. And he was like, I just wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you. I love you. Like, we out here at this festival having a good time. And I was like, dang, he hadn't called and said that in a long time, but I think he was drinking and he was like, I love you. Like, you're my girl. Like, I'm proud of you. He was with his wife. They were, getting ready to go have dinner. And I'm like, I just landed in Atlanta. I'm about to have a good time out here. I'll call you later. And I woke up. It was actually 2 days before he was killed. And then 2 days later, I woke up to the news that he was killed. That sent me in like a spiral. So I'm also already living in fear, not wanting to work in my purpose. I'm dealing with death, but hadn't really dealt with it yet. And then one of my closest friends gets killed. And all of that's happening. I'm dating, and then I go through a heartbreak. I took my ass straight to therapy. I said, because ain't nothing. I don't know what a prayer is going to do at this point. I love God, but this ain't working. I don't understand why all of this bad stuff is happening to me. I don't understand why these relationships, I'm a good person, why these relationships keep failing. I need a therapist to tell me what's going on. And when I went to therapy, it wasn't about not one man. It was really about dealing with trauma, like childhood trauma, just things that I had experienced. And I didn't realize it. And then like my first love, that heartbreak. And I was like, I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days after talking about that. And I'm like, I know I forgave him. I know I'm over this. Right. But it was dealing with that trauma. And that's how I got to therapy. It was a heartbreak that had me like over the edge, like, take me to the hospital. And I was so jacked up. My therapist told me, she was like, yeah, I'm gonna ask to see you 3 days a week. And I was like, me? What happened to like the one day? She was like, no, 3 days a week for an hour and a half. That's how jacked up I was.
So, but nobody had ever like mentioned anything to you about therapy before. You just said, you know what, I gotta go talk to somebody about this.
Nobody. Like, I was laying in my mother's arms, bawling, crying, like, I need to go to therapy. I need help. Yeah. And my mother was like, you want me to help you find one? And I was on like crying, like looking it up. And I found a Black lady, and I was adamant about having a Black lady.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, even from the standpoint of like, your mother was just, she was open enough to say, man, we can do this together.
Right.
Because again, coming in Black households and, us not necessarily being educated on the impact of therapy and mental health and trauma specifically, listen, if I would have mentioned going to therapy to my people back in the day, boy, you better go pray to Jesus. And that would have
right. Right.
That's just, what I'm saying, you better go pray to Jesus, go work out, do something, what I'm saying, do something, go around something to get your mind off of it, so to speak. So it's cool that your introduction into therapy actually came, in a very healthy way. So what was your experience in therapy early on?
I cried maybe for 3 months straight. I cried.
All 3 days a week you was crying every
all
day.
3 days a week.
You had to get that release out. Yeah.
We got to that first heartbreak. it was like, I ain't coming back for the rest of the week. Like I stayed in bed. And I was so depressed that it was eating up my inside. So the lining of my stomach was torn because I was so depressed, like I was throwing up. Um, the lining of my throat was torn from the acid from throwing up so much. I couldn't get food down. I was jacked up. And I think that's why my therapist was like, nah, I need to see you every chance we can get because you got to heal from the inside. That's why you can't eat.
Ooh, that's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah. So when I say I cried for 3 months straight, 3 days a week, I'm just talking about boo-hoo crying. One day my therapist said, well, what you crying for now? I said, I don't know. I don't know if it's because I feel better or if I just still feel a mess. Like, it was serious because, again, I think I mentioned it earlier. I'm a person, or I was a person who, if I was feeling something, I wouldn't tell nobody because I'm such a fixer and I'm got to keep everybody else, feeling good and taking care of everybody else, that I didn't know how to take care of myself. Like, I just didn't understand the concept of self-care. I felt guilty doing stuff for myself at times, especially if somebody that I'm close to needed something or needed me. I felt guilty. I didn't know how to tell people no. I know how to tell them no now. No, I'm straight. I'm cool. I don't want to do that. Nope. It doesn't feel good.
That's
You know?
that's a powerful lesson, in healing,
Mhm.
in the importance of self-care. And self-care is much more than spa days. It's much more than getting yourself, dressed nice, what I'm saying, getting your hair cut, things that are on the surface. Self-care is very much being intentional about your time. And,
Mhm.
you listen, we can't pour from empty cups.
Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? I can't pour into somebody else's cup if mine is empty.
Right.
And that's just the facts of the matter, and the thing about that is when you learn to communicate that with individuals, the people who understand that are the
Mhm.
people that you want to keep around. The people who give you a
Yep.
hard time about that shows you where you stand with that individual and where their mindset is. And going back to what something that we talked about a little bit earlier with our control, we can't control everybody's response to us wanting to take care of ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
Sure can't.
We
We
gotta
can't
let
at
that
all.
shit be what it's gonna be. You know what I'm saying? But this, what you said about healing from the inside out,
Mhm.
is so powerful. In the stage of healing. I'm a big believer that my wife is big on just doing things holistically, mind, body, spirit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There is no outer um no outer production without doing the things internal.
Right.
So it's so powerful, that you said. I know you said it. Listen, I'm still going to therapy to this day. You know what I'm saying? So that's a
And
beautiful thing.
sometimes I don't have an issue.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just like,
Yep.
no, I got all of this on my plate.
Yep.
And so that I don't have anxiety or so that I can really be productive. Like,
Yeah.
how do you think I need to handle this stuff? Or how do I handle conflict in the workplace? Like, this person pissed me off. Or what's the best way to have tough conversations? Because I know I don't always say stuff right. I'm one of those people, they be like, don't say that around Patrice, because Patrice gonna tell you like it is. I say what's on my mind and I'm not sugarcoating it for nobody, right?
Hmm.
So, but sometimes you can't do that with everybody. So I'm learning not to, sometimes I need to be a better listener, How do I listen without jumping and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z? Because I might see the best outcome for you, but maybe you just wanted somebody to listen to you. So I had to go to therapy for all of those things. And then we end up in therapy for stuff that our parents did and our grandparents did.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Like, I know I've been in therapy for some of that.
100%. Shit, that's for real. For real, that is what therapy. Listen, you have to go to therapy for those exact reasons. I mean, it's like my therapist told me one time, early on when I was going, because I'm a social worker in my day to day, And she was
Okay.
like, John, you know, we don't land in the social service realm by accident. You know, we been through stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And but I can feel the impact of, like, you know, me being intentional about my own healing, how that's trickled down into, you know, my father, or, you know, my siblings and my homeboys. You know, we have open dialogue and things like that about healing now. Like, you feel me? Like, that's just not,
Yes.
that just wasn't the typical type of conversation 5-10 years ago, you know. So to see those type of things, you talking about really healing villages, and that's
Right.
really, really, really what it's all about. So that's so powerful.
So where I know, like, and I say it, I just said it yesterday. Listen, I know I got some toxic traits. Like, I know how to get what I want. So it's sometimes I have to take a step back, like, nah, Patrice, now you know you ought to be ashamed of yourself. No, just stop it. And you know, for people, sometimes it's hard to apologize. So I think you have those moments. And I'm one of those people, I don't want to do a whole lot of talking when I need to start thinking about how I'm moving forward and things I need to say to either fix something that I've done or calmly deal with a situation that has been done to me. You know, like, I'm learning not to react how I used to react because there's a cause and effect for everything. So I'll take a moment just to sit in silence with what somebody said before I respond. And I might take a day.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, let me just play this out in my head, or let me read this text message over again. Because, you know, sometimes you'll read something and you'll just react, or you'll hear somebody say something and you're not really listening. I learned all of this in therapy. Sometimes you have to start asking, you know, questions. So what I'm hearing you say is, you know, or sometimes you just need to think about what a person is saying to you instead of being so defensive.
Yeah. Listen to understand. You know,
Yes,
being a little bit more empathetic.
yes. And then well, my grandmother always taught me taking my shoes off to put somebody else's shoes on to
Yeah.
have an understanding of them.
Right.
Um, but you know, people have to really be willing to like open up so that you can have a better understanding of them.
Correct.
You
Correct.
know, so therapy has taught me so much. And I too was once in the social caseworker. And that boggled me down. I tried to do that and do my job. And I said, oh no, they keep giving me these kids. And the kids was like, can I come live with you?
Yeah.
Like, I would give them that tough love, but it was like, can I come live with you? And I remember having to put one of my kids, sending her to the detention center on Thanksgiving, because I'm like, listen, you can't be try to do this to your family. Like, no.
Right.
So I tried to do that, and I was like, listen, I love kids, but I can't do this, because it was boggling me down. And mentally, I wanted to, like, why can't I help everybody? I see exactly why she's this way, because her mother is just like, and I said, girl, you can't save the world. Like, you got to save yourself. So therapy, you know, therapy is so valuable to me. And I tell people all the time, if you got friends and y'all going through something in your friendship, go to therapy.
Yeah.
Go to therapy with your sisters, your brothers. Go to therapy with your parents.
Yeah, that's right. Normalize it.
Yeah, normalize it. Like, it's okay to go to therapy, because maybe we don't communicate the same and you don't hear what I'm saying. I don't hear what you're saying. It's okay.
Yeah, 100%. Talk to me about Element 13. Like, what is Element 13? What does that look like? What does it mean to you today?
So Element 13 is a marketing and event management company. Um, Ashley Taylor is the owner of Element 13. Um, as I was transitioning back into, you know, this industry of sports and entertainment, she had started. I met Ashley because I was mentoring her when she was coming out of college. And then when she moved back to Cleveland, what they try to do to women, especially Black women, is pin us against each other. So we had a situation where, some individuals were trying to pin us against each other, and she can do this and he can do that. And, it was just a mess, right? But Ashley was the same every time I would see her out, again, okay, we're going to let that go. We're Black women trying to do it in the city and then outside of the city. And I'm one of those people, I don't think local. Like, I really think global. And once I kind of got my feet back in the door, I also don't believe in doing stuff that I'm not good at. I can do things, but if that's not my expertise, let me hire somebody who can. And so I had an opportunity with Shawnee O'Neal, who was a client at the time, and it was for an event. And I called Ashley up. I said, Ashley, you're great at events, and I want to give you this opportunity. It's pro bono, but you'll be on TV. And I think this is something good that will, in turns, bring you more money. So she was like, okay, I'll do it. After she did the event, she executed very well. We ended up talking just to sit down and talk about the opportunity. And she said, hey, why don't you start coming down here? And I'm like, man, I done worked with women. I've had some bad, I don't want to say bad, but I've had some experiences that I wish I could have, done without. And I was really fearful to work with another woman. Like, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't. And I started just going down to Spaces and Co. and just kind of filling her out, because I knew she had something that I needed in a partner. And I needed a partner just as strong as me. I needed a partner, if I needed a day or two off, she could handle everything. So we just kind of like really start building trust with one another and getting to know one another. And it was tough because we're both alpha females. And she's like, okay, you good at this. I'm good at that. We're both bossy, so we have to find a balance. And then we just became partners. We talked it through. What does this look like? Where are you trying to take your career? And I'm like, by the time I'm 40, I want to be retired from doing this, and I want to be producing and directing films. So she was like, okay, so you want to end up in LA? And I'm like, yeah. And I was just explaining to her, here are the clients that I know I can bring in. Here are the people who I'm connected to. And we really started building that way. And we would go out to eat probably 2 or 3 times a week and getting to know each other. And then we went through some things where it's like, I got your back. And she realized I had her back, and I realized she had mine. So it took time. We actually just talked about it a few days ago. We talked about us both having that fear. Her having that fear of kind of relinquishing her baby and saying, okay, this is my partner. She's also a decision maker. And then me having the fear of just working with another female.
Yeah. Listen, face it. I'm a firm believer of facing fear.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, facing fear is, I do affirmations with my child, with my
Okay.
son. And facing fear and being fearless is one of the top 2 and 3 that we talk about every day. He only 11 months. He can't understand me, but his little spirit does. Yeah, exactly. So that's very, very important. I feel you 100% on that. Listen, for the young up and coming entrepreneur, or even they don't even necessarily have to be young, but like somebody who's just trying to figure out their way, in the space of entrepreneurship, looking to build brands or just looking to find their footing. Even somebody that may even be an entrepreneur that having early success like you once had, and it's just coming a little too fast. What are some things that they can kind of like practice or put into place early on to kind of avoid some of those pitfalls that you may have seen, but ultimately some things that kind of like save them some just lumps, period, down the road? I know it's a loaded question.
That is a loaded question. So one I would say is, here's how I look at my year. So every year I write down what I want to achieve in that year, right? What projects I want to work on, what's on my wish list, right? And I do that for a few reasons. One is to keep me on track, right? Two is because so many different things will come at you that look good. And sometimes when we're desperate to make something happen or we're desperate to meet a financial quota, we will jump at things that aren't for us. So stay in alignment with what you are supposed to be doing and your purpose. If it does not fit your purpose, if you can't quite see it, I wouldn't say jump at it. And I know most people will be like, but it might be a blessing in disguise. Like, yes, it could be, but it also may take you off track 2 to 3 years. Like, I've been there before. You know, it was times where it was like, if you just stay the course and do what you know you're supposed to be doing, like, and I'm a firm believer, when God gives you a vision, you have to do it. Like, you have to do it. One, somebody else is going to do it if you don't. And two, you're going to take yourself off course of what he really assigned you to do. Yep. So you have to be in alignment with your purpose. You have to be in alignment with the assignment that God has for you. That is one of the most important things I can say. I don't take all clients. I don't take all opportunities. One, because some people are wasting my time. Even if they're paying, that's not your assignment. You shouldn't do it. And I say this all the time to like Ashley, like, this person may waste my time. And sometimes she's like, but they paying. Like, no, they're wasting our time. Like, we have goals of what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. And this person is wasting our time. It's money in the bank, but we're wasting our time. So you have to really like look at your assignment daily, weekly. Like, am I on the right track? And things may pop up. Like, for us, we make an event that we didn't expect. So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about taking on projects and taking on clients for me that don't fit into my assignment. The next thing would be relationships. Relationships are more important than a contract. Relationships are more important than $1, because I can have a relationship with you today. And if you say, you know, just checking in, hey, Patrice, how you doing? But I'm like, I ain't answering this phone. John don't got no money. Like, he ain't about to call me about no check. Like, hey, what's up? Like, if I have that attitude, I can ruin a relationship, because you may be on the other end to look out for me 5 years from now. So relationships are everything in business, because there's been plenty of times where somebody has said something negative about me and somebody on the other end was like, that's not Patrice. Patrice come through every time I call her. That, nope. Or they said something negative and it's drawing people to me and they've said, that's not who you are. Like, I can't believe that person said that. And I'm like, listen, that don't got nothing to do with me. How you want to work? So relationships are so, so important. There are people who I can call on to this day who maybe I've never done anything for them. Maybe they've never done anything for me, but I always made them feel like you are just as important. And then last but not leastly, do not be afraid to talk about money. Don't start working without a contract signed. I don't care if it takes 2 to 3 months to sign that contract or to get the details as they need to be beneficial for both parties. Don't start working because you're eager to start the job or you're desperate for the opportunity. And most people can discern desperation from, you know, somebody who really is confident. I've been at situations where it was like, I'm so desperate from this. I need this. Like, this is what I want. Just a quick story with Mookie Betts. Like, I prayed for a baseball client in 2008. Prayed. When I say prayed, like, I just, Lord, send me a baseball client. He didn't send me a baseball client until almost 12, 13 years later. Right. But I prayed for that. And I was so used to, guys just signing on a dotted line and getting right to it. But with Mookie, like I had to go through the agents. We had to go back and forth. And at one point I was like, forget this. I don't want to work with him. Forget it. It's just too much. And then it was like, no, this is what you prayed for. Just be patient. Like, but it wasn't happening as fast. And it was like, you're not about to act desperate, or you're not about to just walk away from something you prayed for. Like, this is just business. So just understanding that you have to handle the business first before you start working. Nobody likes to talk about money, but I will tell you in the first 2 minutes, okay, I get it. Nobody likes to talk about money, but what's your budget before we start sharing ideas and getting excited about one another and wanting to professionally date one another to see where this can go. What's your budget? Because if your budget does not fall in line with me, then it's not going to work. And then the last thing is, it's okay. Like I said before, in my personal life, it's okay to tell people no. It's okay not to be able to do every single thing, not to be able to help every single person. It's okay. Don't feel guilty about it, because when you're focused on your goals at hand and being aligned with what God wants you to do, you're going to tell some people no who even have great ideas. You're going to have to tell them no.
That's powerful. That is very powerful. There's a lot of power in utilizing that word no.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? That is very powerful. Do you think anybody can be an entrepreneur?
No.
Why?
Everybody doesn't have an entrepreneurial spirit.
What does that mean, Patrice?
So I say this.
What does that mean?
So I have some friends, creative, good at what they do, but some people don't want to stay up to the late night hours. Like, I get people like, you working on your birthday? You working on the holidays? Like, yes, some people, and I'm not saying that you can't be an entrepreneur, but I'm saying that to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to do things that you don't want to do. You don't feel like doing. Right. You have to put in hours that most people who work a 9-to-5 aren't putting in. Mm-hmm. So I don't think everybody is an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just don't think it. Some people are like born to be entrepreneurs, like it's days where I'm like, that ain't me. Yeah. But I know how to maintain entrepreneurship. Like, I know, okay, so when we get off this call, I can't just go to bed. Like, I gotta work on something for a client that has to be done. Like, they have to have this information before I go to sleep. So if that means I don't go to sleep tonight and I'm back in the office at 8:00 in the morning, that's just what that means. So I don't think everybody has the spirit to be an entrepreneur.
Everybody don't have the spirit to be able to sacrifice things
right
in the moment for the greater good.
I think it can be learned.
Okay.
I'm not saying that you're not an entrepreneur, so you can never be an entrepreneur. I think it can be learned. Yeah. But like, an entrepreneur is just like wakes up like, okay. When I worked for CVS, I remember sitting there saying like, girl, as much as you was trying to run from that, you're going to have to face your fears, because this ain't you. Right. This is not you. Right. And this morning, I didn't want to wake up to go into the office this morning. Right. I was like, Lord, I don't feel like dealing with none of this. And I sat at my desk for like an hour, like, ugh. And then I thought, okay, I can't flake on John today. I got to do this today. Like, really, Anthony would kill me. Like, I gotta do this today. I went to work out. I rushed home. I showered. I threw on a little outfit. I put on a little makeup. And when you weren't quite ready, we was having technical difficulties. I was like, oh, praise God.
Oh shit, I might not have to do it.
I'm like, praise God, it wasn't me. It would like, because I'm also too trying to stick to what I say I'm gonna do. So if I tell you you'll have this today or I'll be there, I'm trying to make sure that I show up for others I want people to show up for me, and that I stick to what I say I'm going to do. Even if I'm tired, there are just some people who can't even grasp that. So it can be learned, but it ain't for everybody.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's one thing when you know what you're getting every 2 weeks or every week. It's another thing when you like, if I don't do this,
Right.
then this could ruin a check for 6 months.
Right. Right.
So I do want to get to a place where my money is working for me. Like I don't want to get to a place where, I'm an entrepreneur, but I still got to do certain stuff for clients to get that check.
Right.
That's like working in corporate America almost, but it could end at any moment.
Well, listen, Patrice, you have shown up for me today. I appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking your time. This has been a wonderful conversation. I know you have provided a lot of value. I can't thank you enough again, man. I don't take any of this, lightly at all. Thank you. You have been wonderful. Before we get out of here, I got a few rapid questions I want to hit you with. And I'm going to continue your evening so you can get your stuff situated to your client. So we're going to get you out of here in a minute. So listen, we in a brand new year. I don't like New Year's resolutions, but I love intentions. What are your intentions for 2021?
Well, one, that is my word for 2021.
Look at God. Look at God. Yeah.
Consistent in all that I am doing. So intentional in just who I'm talking to, who I'm letting into my space. But my intentions for 2021 are to personally, was personally and professionally. Personally and professionally is to balance my personal life and my professional life, and making sure that one is not more important than the other. So that's very important to me, is to have that balance. I am being very intentional with my time this year, because I have wasted or allowed people to waste that time. And I'm being very intentional on how I speak to myself and what I say to myself. So that's very, very important to me. And then just being consistent in every area of my life, consistent with my praying, and, consistent with my working out, and that self-care, because that self-care is so important, consistent with my health, and consistent like with my friendships. That's what I'm focused on. I have been so intentional about being successful. And it's one thing when you are getting deals done and, I did this or I did that, but it's another thing when all those other areas in your life look a mess. Right. That's not success. Right. So I can look successful, but I want to be successful in every area.
Yeah, that's what's up. What is your purpose, and how are you currently living your purpose today?
So about 5 years ago, I would have told you my purpose was to save my father's life. And about 5 years ago, I was like, okay, if that's it for me, I've served my purpose, right? I think my purpose in this next season of my life is to share the knowledge that I have without the expectations of receiving something for sharing it. I believe when you love without expectations, when you give without expectations, God opens doors that you have no clue that were even assigned to you. So I believe that is my purpose in this season, is to share knowledge. And instead of walking away from people, like pouring into them when my cup is full, but pouring into them, loving on them without expectations.
Yeah, dope. That's what's up. What is something about you that people be surprised to know?
Something about me that people are surprised to know.
Yes.
You
can't skip.
Ooh. You know what? Well, I've already told you guys, like, people are always surprised when I say I donated a kidney, right? They're always like, really? So you only have one? But
you could have kept your Tupac part for this right here, but you
I
already
could have. I definitely could have. I definitely could have.
You gotta
but,
get something else now.
That's a good one. That's a real good one. I'm such an open book that I just, I kind of tell people like, everything, but I think most people, no, they don't be surprised that I'm not married or in a relationship. They be like, you work a lot. I can see how. I don't know. Oh, let me tell y'all. Let me tell you. I did. I think I told you earlier that I never wanted to be a singer. I knew I wanted to go into business, right? But I was in gospel choir and had a few solos.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay, all right.
Wait a minute. And so my mom used to cater for these plays, like the gospel plays. And Dottie Peoples was in one of the plays. And I walked up to her. This is how confident I was. I walked up to her and was like, I'm going to sing you a song. And I sang this song, and my uncle and my sister joke about it to this day. And I sang this song to her like I was Whitney Houston.
Oh, wow.
And I sound horrible.
I was in there blowing.
So that is something that I have tried to do. Yes. Yep. That's something that I am embarrassed about.
Okay. All right. What scares you?
Not being loved properly.
That's a good one. That is a good one. Do you have a favorite quote or favorite scripture?
So I have a lot of scriptures that literally get me through, but there was a quote that Usher used to always say, and it stuck with me. That probably was a part of molding me. Strivers achieve and dreamers believe.
Strivers achieve and dreamers believe.
Yes. Okay. And honestly, I used to be like, I ain't about to just be sleep dreaming. Like, I'm about to start achieving. And that would always like push me. Like, you got to strive for it. You got to do it. You got to do it. Like, I would tell myself that all the time. So that was probably one of my favorite quotes.
That's good. That's good. If you could pick up the phone and call your 20-year-old self, knowing what you know today, what would you tell yourself?
Girl, let that nigga go.
Hey, I swear I've had at least, I've done like 25 of these podcast episodes. I've had maybe 10 or 12 women, and that has not been the first time I've heard that answer. So that is so funny. I don't know what it is about them early 20s, but it's usually that's been a typical answer right there.
Yeah. Just like that. Hey, girl. Stop crying now. Let that nigga go. The real one ain't even about to show up yet. Right. Let him go.
Right. That's a fact.
That's exactly what I would say to my 20-year-old. So
that is hilarious. That's a good one. Well, listen, man, tell everybody your social media tags, your website and things like that, how they can kind of get in contact with you, what you have coming up. Just where they can find, where people can find you and things like that.
So you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter, @_Patrice Monique. You can find my company at Elemnt 13. That's spelled ELMNT 13. You can find our website at elemnt13.com. And you don't really need to find me on Facebook. That's just for my family to talk trash when we talking football and stuff. But yes, that's where you can find me, Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, wonderful, Patrice. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much again. Like I said, I don't take it lightly. I don't take it for granted. You have been wonderful. You showed up for me. Hopefully, I did the same for you today.
Yes, you
It's
did.
been wonderful. Again, everybody who has been supporting the podcast will continue to do so. Please, the merch is available. We have hoodies available in different colors and sizes. Please contact me if you are interested. Again, check us out on YouTube, the Live Your Purpose Podcast YouTube channel. Check us out on our audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Anchor. Again, man, thank you. Another episode, Live Your Purpose Podcast. We out.